everyone, and thank you for watching our very first ReGen sessions. My name is Cassie, and I serve with the Regeneration Project and Ministry of Western Seminary. Our ReGen sessions are recorded videos designed to provide practical and theological insight to the everyday church leader. Through Western's Regeneration Project, we put on events, forums, and trainings to equip leaders, parents, and the next generation to thoughtfully engage with culture's challenging questions regarding faith, truth, and the church. Our ReGen sessions will be hosted by Dan Kimball, who is one of the VPs at Western Seminary, an associate professor of leadership and theology, as well as the founding pastor at Vintage Faith Church. Today's session guest is Sean McDowell, an associate professor at Biola University, as well as an author, speaker, and a Christian apologist. We hope today's session equips and encourages you.
So we are here with Sean McDowell, who I'm going to be introducing in a moment. But this is the first ever Western Seminary kind of talk with people about next generation and theology. And what I can say is when I think of next generation and theology, and I'm not just saying this because he's here today, the first person I think of is Sean McDowell. And Sean, do you remember I met you at a wedding that I officiated probably 25 years ago? I think you were either still in college or right out of college up in the Bay Area.
I remember it well.
Yeah, and then our lives began intersecting after that. But it's really true. I can't stress how much I really am so thankful to God for what you're doing, and that you bring truth in a way that's heartfelt and sensitive, but theologically strong to leaders and next generation in general. So, like, you're kind of heroic to me. So, thank you for coming on this for the very first thing that we're doing here with Western Seminary. So, what we're going to do here, and Sean, for those that don't know him, he is the associate professor still. Associate professor at Biola and of apologetics, right?
That's right, yeah.
And you've been there for quite a while?
I think I'm finished up 13 or 14 years.
13 or 14 years. Yikes.
Yeah.
Boy, time goes quick. And actually, Sean was, I talked to you and I was considering shifting my role over to Western Seminary and got some advice from you about that. So thank you for that. So what we're going to do is what we're going to do here is I'm going to ask Sean a few quick questions about what he thinks. In fact, I'm asking the question now. One is what you think. In fact, let me read this because I got it more clear here. What do you feel are the most hopeful things happening amongst new generations? Then what are your concerns? And then if you would just share some practical insight for church leaders who are doing this. Also, what I want to raise up right to front is some of this may refer to a book that Sean has out, and he didn't ask me to do this. This is me totally just think this is a great book. It's called Apologetics for an Ever-Changing Culture, and Sean was the editor, and there's lots of good stuff in here. And we're going to actually ask Sean at the end about what would you recommend for resources for future. But let's start out with this before I go on, I did have to just keep this in my church office. There's me about 15, 18 years ago with Stan.
Incredible.
The long story. I got to meet him twice and spent about a half an hour with him. That's a little side story because Sean's a Marvel fan. So my question first is, Sean gets to travel all over the place. He speaks all over the place. He teaches younger generations at Biola that are committed to Jesus to be going there, but you got a great spectrum of view that most people don't get to have. And if I had to just ask you, what do you think are the most hopeful things that you see happening out there with next generation in the States primarily? What comes to your mind? What would you say is the most hopeful thing happening out there?
Well, I love that you started there. And Dan, I remember you officiated the wedding of my friend Rob. And then we met at an event at Biola early 2000s on the emerging church.
That's right.
And it was like tense and people didn't know what was going on. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
think this guy's on our side here. And I learned very quickly that you were
Yep.
already doing next gen ministry at that point. And that's really where we connected and have been friends ever since, with a heartbeat of evangelism, apologetics, discipleship, the local church.
Yep.
And so there was hopeful things then, and there's hopeful things now. There always will be. When I speak on Gen Z, and now some of the new evidence, some of the new data on Gen Alpha is just starting to bubble up. I mean, these are maybe 14-year-olds and younger, so you can only trust that data so much. But one of the points I make to audiences is I'll say, you have far more in common with this generation than you do differences, because of what's often called intersectionality. We are divided. We're a different race. We're a different sex. We're a different economic class. And it's like we miss how much we have in common with one another. And that's true for this generation. So if it feels like they're foreign in the language and the technology and how their humor, you, whoever's watching this, have more in common with them than you do differences. The other thing I also say is I encourage people to keep it positive. And that's where you started. Keep it positive. This is probably 4 or 5 years. No, it was pre-COVID. So it was probably 2019. A girl came up to me in tears and she said, "Thank you for emphasizing the positive of my generation. I get so tired of being beat up by older generations, and it makes me want to disengage the church." Now that's one person, but I've heard that a lot. So let's start with hope. Let's start with positive. And I think the main thing is I see God raising up younger generations of leaders, leaders who are carrying the same message that you and I care about, and everybody watching this, but doing it with different media. There's some who are trying to do it on TikTok. There's some who are trying to do it on YouTube. There's some who are doing it in their local church. And I'm encouraged by seeing these voices of people stepping up. And the cool part where I'm at is I'm able to reach out to them and encourage them. And maybe they've seen something that I've done, so it's meaningful to them the way people have encouraged you and I. But I look, and even my son has made a choice to step into this space. I didn't pressure him at all. In fact, sometimes try to talk him out of it, because I know the weight of what it means to be an evangelist, an apologist, and a leader. But he is so savvy with these new kinds of media, and he's committed. He's fearless on some levels. Sometimes I'm like, you can use a little bit of fear, but like gets him out of his comfort zone. And he's just one example of these young voices of IC people that we've passed the baton on to, who are running with it. Now, one caution with that, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, is there were gatekeepers, Dan. When you and I were getting into ministry, you had to have a gatekeeper to publish a book. You had to have a gatekeeper to get on stage. You had to have a gatekeeper to be hired to be a pastor or a youth pastor. Now, quite literally, anybody with a smartphone can start a social media platform, and there's no gatekeepers. But social media also doesn't necessarily reward people who are good evangelists and apologists. It rewards those who provoke. It rewards those who play the game. And so I do fear with this generation, as eager and as gifted and as promising that they are, if we don't step in and mentor and encourage them theologically and personally and in the church, we're going to see a far greater deconstruction season in 5, 10, 20 years than we've seen over the past 5 or 10 years.
So the hope is the younger generations that are stepping into taking their faith seriously. And your son is Scott McDowell, and he has his own TikTok and Instagram out there, and he's pretty amazing just as a young guy listening to him. So I've been really following him as well, and just seeing that super encouraging. And then the same way, what you're saying is the concern is just the free-for-all flood of information that's out there online, and anyone has a platform. I just was watching, it's actually Talbot Seminary, the little thing with Carl Trueman. Did you see that this morning?
I don't know if I saw it this morning, but we've had him on, and he's amazing.
Because he was saying, similar to what you said, that there's no gatekeeping, that church leaders, it used to be you have to go to a conference And then your voice, even at conferences, was generally proven that you led a church. You had an actual church you were leading. There was fruit that you could evaluate from who is platformed. And now there's it's a free for all for voices. You don't even have to be have credibility. It's how you're provoking people. So to me, I think that's one of the biggest I have two dangers, but I'll just say that this is for you. That's one of them, absolutely.
Mm.
So let me flip this to some practical things.
Sure.
And I'll just say this. I've been seeing almost the theme verse in Judges 2 when it says, this is after Moses passing it on, goes past Joshua. Then after that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who neither knew the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. And it kind of feels like that's what's happening today. And the sad part here is when there's an absence of information or false information, then it says they went and then forsook the Lord of God of their ancestors, and they end up following and worshiping the various gods of the people around them. It feels like there's so many influences around, and if you know the one true God, it's easy to start believing in false gods out there today. So let me say, if you're speaking to people serving in churches, church leaders, give us some practical insight of what you would tell them. If you have a couple minutes now, share what should they be thinking of, or even practical things to be doing as church leaders, older and younger, in their churches. So I'm going to turn this back to you.
I love this. Would it be okay if I lay out some of the unique challenges that we're facing first?
Yep.
To kind of put on people's radar. So since you mentioned this conversation we're having, I've been thinking through some of the trends that I've seen culturally speaking. And these are trends that our generation is really dealing with. And I think we need to be savvy to respond. So here's a few things. Number one is I think there's a conspiracy first mindset that's shaping this generation. Now, there's always been conspiracies about JFK, people landing on the moon, but now it's like we're seeing conspiracies explode, gain more steam, and be rewarded by the analytics. So many of the young people are far more likely to believe some of these conspiracies than probably older generations are. And they've been raised in a conspiracy first mindset. Another thing that I'm seeing that really concerns me, Dan, and it's tied to the first one, is the rise of anti-Semitism. I have never seen this in my lifetime. And obviously October 7th and what happened there and the fallout from it, without getting political, has a huge amount to do with it. But we're also seeing people with big platforms really giving space to anti-Semitic views and gaining an audience that we haven't in the past. I had a Orthodox Jew who works with PragerU on Biola's campus, and he told me, he goes, "This is the first time somebody saw my little hat and was like, 'Are you a Messianic Jew?'" He's like, "No one's ever asked me that," which was interesting. But in the conversation, he said, "We're now having the question and the thought, will America be a safe place for Jews in the future?" Every Jew is asking that. A third huge shift would be the AI revolution. And that's obvious. I mean, just the Catholic Church and the Pope has released this huge report on it, really asking people to pull it back because we've just unleashed the beast, so to speak, in his mind. But this is changing everything in front of us, how we gather information, how we consider what it means to be human, how we communicate. I just saw with Anthropic, they created this AI system and it was supposed to accomplish a task and they were trying to shut it down. And it was able to read through all of the emails and realize it was being shut down, come up with a whole new code to prevent it. And through the emails, realized that one of the key people in charge was having an affair and used that information to blackmail him if they would shut AI down. Now, obviously, it's not conscience, but the way it's functioning is scary. And that has transformed this generation. Social media still changes everything. Just about 6 months ago in New York, they open up the first chatbot, like cafe, where people would walk in, and it's built to set your phone on this stand, and it's for one person and their chatbot to be served in this cafe. Now that is stunning. The whole purpose of cafe is to talk with someone, relate, and be there embodied with somebody. And they're building this technology for social media. So the development of chatbots is changing everything. I think rampant pornography, Dan. I mean, you've talked about this. My dad has talked about this for years, but with AI, we haven't seen anything yet. And I'll be frank, there was an article in the New York Times 2 years ago about how I think it was about 2/3 of college students in a Midwestern university who had had sex in the past year or so had engaged in choking. 2/3. And if I remember correctly, 40% of them was between age 12 and 17 years old the first time that happened. Now, where did they get that idea? Only one place, which is what? It's through pornography. Now, there's other issues that concern me. I think the growth of Islam is huge. Mental and emotional anxiety. And I'm also getting asked everywhere I go questions about Orthodoxy and Catholicism in a way I wasn't in the past. Mm-hmm. These are some of the trends and shifts that I'm seeing. So here's my encouragement for pastors. A few things is, number one, we have to teach timeless truths, but also timely ones. So if we only talk about timeless theological issues in church history and don't deal with the present, people will feel like theology doesn't relate to their present lives. But if we just talk about current issues, then we divorce those issues from the rich history of the church that we're a part of in this tradition that we have. So we need to teach timeless theological truths, timeless apologetic truths, but also address timely issues that come up in the current cultural moment in which we inhabit. I think we have to do both of those. So that balance, sometimes I see people missing. So timeless and timely truths. The second thing is relationships are more important than ever. Face-to-face relationships. And I'm really convinced that somebody's worldview is shaped primarily by relationships more than anything else in ways we don't even realize. And so what makes Christianity unique is that we not only have worldview responses to the challenges of our day, but we have an incarnational faith in which God sends prophets and a book and reveals in nature, but ultimately reveals himself when he takes on human flesh and walks among us. Paul says in, 1 Thessalonians 1:9, we not only gave you the gospel, but our very own lives. There's a draw to community. There's a draw to relationship. And this is something to lean into more. I'm looking on my desk and it's a whole new book about the power of hospitality. That's more important than it's ever been. I had an atheist at Bible a couple weeks ago, and he talked about how he's like, gosh, we don't have this natural built-in community that you have. And I could tell that he wanted that and desired that, which we all do because we're made in God's image. So teach timeless truths, teach timely truths. And also that emphasis on relationship is very, very, very important. Those two things I want to really highlight for this generation. We can go into depth of what that looks like. We can talk about a few more things if we need to, and that matters. But I think we shouldn't shy away from these tough issues. I think we lean into them and we teach them and we talk about them. And I guess one other thing I would say is I think some of the criticism I'm hearing from ex-evangelicals, I'm hearing from atheists, I'm hearing from people outside the church, is that we don't always create a good place for questions and for doubt and for people who are on a spiritual journey. The moment someone becomes a Christian or shows interest in God, it's like dot every I and cross every T. We need to get you signed up. If you're not, for us, you're against us. And I think this undermines us in two ways. It undermines people in the church who just say, I have questions, I have doubts, this doesn't make sense to me. Is this a place I can ask these questions and get an honest response? And it's also off-putting to those on the outside who look at us and go, God, they have everything buttoned up. They don't have any doubts. They don't have any questions. It can't be that simple. So we have to find a way to preach boldly, have convictions, but also be honest with ourselves on our journey and create a space for people who have questions to feel like they can come and have these questions. And I don't think we do that really well as evangelicals. And it turns people away from the church towards a deconstruction process. And I think many on the outside are looking in going, it's not that simple. I have questions. Maybe I'm not welcome there. Those are three things I would love to see us as a church work on. Challenge them, question them, raise questions. How is this helpful?
Can you then, all right, so say I'm a youth pastor in Paramus, New Jersey. That's the town I grew up in.
Cool.
So, and I'm really wanting to, I have 30 high schoolers in my group. What would you tell me to practically then do? Say, like with timeless truths, should I teach series? What have you seen out there where various churches and not just youth ministries, but all ages too, what are they practically doing? Teaching series, forums, what do you see out there?
Well, if I was in New Jersey, I'm thinking around me are a whole lot of people who see the world differently. There's going to be Muslims, there's going to be mosques, there's going to be atheists, there's going to be every conceivable worldview.
Yeah.
So I think it's 2018, 2019, wrote a book with a friend of mine, friend of yours, J. Warner Wallace, former atheist, cold case detective. And he said, we need to move from teaching to training. And he said, like in the police department, we're not just giving people head knowledge, we are training them. And then we take them into the field and they literally have to survive in the field. So there's built-in interest while you're teaching them to learn the information. So what I would do is I would think through what are some places I could go visit and get a tour of. And then it's like, hey, whether it's 6 students, whether it's 30 students, we're going to go tour a mosque. But before we do so, we're going to do 6 or 8 or 10 weeks on the Trinity, the deity of Jesus, the basis of Islam. And then there's kind of a built-in, like a little drama that's a part of it. You could do that. You could go out on the streets and put up a sign that just says, like a Charlie Kirk kind of thing. Just ask me anything, bring your questions, and have a microphone. You got to do it respectfully. Take students out there and just say, we want to ask you questions. What are your toughest questions about God? And then you get in a conversation and you say, all you got to do is ask a question. And all you got to do is listen. And what this does is this gets students getting challenged in their faith. It gets them meeting other people who see the world differently. And it helps to build an interest in learning this stuff. So all of a sudden they go, oh my goodness, how do I make sense of the Trinity? Wait a minute, he said the Bible's corrupted. Is it actually true? Wait a minute, when I asked this guy his question about God, he's like, how can God allow children at 5 to die of cancer? And then all of a sudden you have a built-in interest among students to learn this stuff. So bottom line for that hypothetical youth pastor in New Jersey, I'm thinking, how do I get my kids out of the comfort zone into the world where they're challenged? And then it builds some interest in learning theology and apologetics because there's drama that's there. And of course, there's wisdom in how you do this. You don't just say, I'm going to find the top atheist in New Jersey. Let's go talk to him. I mean, you have to use wisdom. You got to get parents and your leadership on board. And maybe, some people you bring to the church to talk with your students. That's the kind of drama that I like, that it makes students, I think, take their faith a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, and I teenagers. They went out to Impact 360 out in Georgia, and
Mm.
you took them to a mosque. You did exactly what you just said, and it was extremely powerful in their lives
Mm.
because, and you said, and then I got to be with you in Berkeley when you had a group of, I think, 20 high schoolers from down in Los Angeles. And you do this, and I think what's important, what you said, if I'm that youth pastor, you first did training before before you had guests come in. You had an atheist professor from Berkeley come in. You had a gay Episcopalian priest who was married to a man come in.
That's
You had
right.
different people coming in. You had that almost comedian. In fact, he was the one that I was almost worried about the most. The guy that came in because he was so funny that he was an atheist and he wrote it. Christopher, no,
David
Fitzgerald.
David
Yeah,
Fitzgerald, super likable.
that's
Yeah.
almost what made me think like, boy, I really like him. Like he had the humor and everything. In fact, I bought one of his books and he signed it, Yours in Christ, David Fitzgerald.
Oh my word.
But what you modeled was exactly what you're doing. You trained them and then you brought them into an experience and then you debriefed afterwards. And the debriefing was
Mm.
really important. But so yeah, so this was you do this in real life. It's not just theory, is in that. And if you had to say too, because you also said some of the timeless truths, what topics would you make sure? You also placed yourself in New Jersey, and that's totally true. Like Santa Cruz, there is not a formal mosque in Santa Cruz. There's one
Mm.
Islamic center that I've been there. It's in a house. It's very small. The population is not great here. You go across to San Jose, it's a whole different thing. Your geographic region makes a difference too. So what you said was know your region. And what were the topics that you feel that they should make sure they're covering?
And by the way, you can invite in Latter-day Saint missionaries. If you're in
Mhm.
Santa Cruz, you could probably find some new age people to come
Yeah,
and talk to you. Like
yeah,
you got to contextualize
yeah.
this. And by the way, I'll plug our friend Brett Kunkel has a ministry called Maven, and it's maventruth.com. He does the training, takes youth groups on these trips. He will do that for you if you're intimidated and not even sure where to start. So that's a resource you can do. But really, you just kind of think of what are the essentials of the faith, certain like Nicene essentials, and you walk students through that. So the existence of God, that God is a creator, that the Bible is true, that Jesus is divine, that salvation is by faith. I mean, these are kind of the big core issues that we really, these are like, if you reject that Jesus has risen from the grave, you are outside the fold. You are not a Christian. So these are the essentials. Now, if we differ over the age of the earth, if we differ over the role of women in the church, these are significant issues, but they're not faith defining issues. So I start with the essentials and want students to know those key essentials. And you could do the same thing with apologetics. Now that I think about it, my father and I wrote a book called The 12 Crucial Truths. And we actually walk through the 12 main theological issues. And there's some apologetics woven in. There's actually relational ways to live these out. So it's a kind of book I've had youth groups go through. It's called 12 Crucial Truths. Those are like the essentials in that book. We're not talking about ethical issues. We're not talking about those kind of things. We're talking about the core theological truths. And then you could add like the big apologetic issues. So like, does God exist? Is Jesus God again? Although that's theological, what's the evidence for it? Evidence for creation, the problem of evil. Like these are kind of timeless questions. Is the Bible reliable? These are the big ones you want to address. And then if you want to do timely ones, maybe you talk about AI and you weave in something. So that's what I mean. The big apologetic issues to defend and the big theological issues that really make evangelicals evangelicals. And I think Christians Christians. Those are the key ones we don't want to miss and just get caught up in the moment.
Yeah, no, Maven is great. They actually have used our building here the past two summers. Tim
Oh, no way.
from Nebraska
Yeah,
has come out, and
yeah,
we've hosted them here at our in our church building here. Yep. So,
that makes sense. Super
yep.
cool.
All right. They also said relationships. How again the it might even be part-time, or it might be a lead pastor, and I don't know too many teenagers. How do these relationships, the relational part form? What does that look like practically for them to do?
That's a great question. I'm not a youth pastor, so I taught in a Christian school and I'm a professor. So
Hmm.
this is a little bit academic for me. I think you could answer this better than I could. But my main answer is we can't just expect students to come to our turf. We got to go to theirs. It's both. So you can try to think of events and experiences that students will come to, and there's creative ways to do that. And that might look different in New Jersey than it does in Nebraska versus Santa Cruz. But how do I serve the needs of students in this community? I mean, when I was in, gosh, this is years ago, I guess I was serving at a church for a period, a long time, but we built a skate park because kids were all skating, didn't have a place to go. I'm like, this serves our community, gets them off the street, did it at the church, got support, built a skate park. So that's where we kind of just looked at the needs of our community and went out and intentionally built those relationships. And then a lot of those students started coming to church. So you got to work bottom up, got to be present in students' lives and be genuine, not just trying to trick them to come to church, but be genuine, genuinely involved and genuinely care. And that's what I mean by relationally connecting.
Yep, I think it has to be very intentional or it won't happen. There's something you said earlier, and I was just thinking I want to restate that if you're doing these kind of things, which I highly, highly recommend, you have to make sure the Christian parents understand in advance
Mm,
what you're doing, because then it'll be like, what in the world are they doing? Why are they going to a
right.
mosque? Why are they having a are they going, they teaching synchronism? They're having a Muslim come and talk to our youth. Always bring in others so they know why you're doing this, or it could get very confusing. So that's there.
Good word.
Yeah, but because I really believe what you're saying is critical, and that churches, youth, I mean, ch the whole church, not just youth or young adult ministries, but this kind of training versus teaching, I think, is really super important. And you modeled that, so that's why I'm uh,
Mm,
very thankful for this. All right, I do have like two or three questions that
sure.
I have that have come in from students. At Western Seminary, we have cohorts for master's degrees that we do, and that's what I'm focusing on down in Bay Area. But it ties into some of this kind of confusion, I think, that's out there. Um, One is many young adults today seem spiritually curious, but institutionally are distrustful. Why do you think this is happening? Kind of distrust of the organized church or the institutionalized church. You hear that over and over again. Why do you think that's happening today more than before? And any thoughts of how to respond faithfully and wisely? Distrust of organized
Yeah,
things out
that's a
there.
that's a tough question. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I remember, hearing back in the 60s, don't trust anybody over what was it, like 20 or something like
Yeah,
that. So
right.
it's not really a new, maybe it was 30. It's not really a new phenomenon to be distrustful. But I think when it broke in the 60s and 70s, it was things like, the Nixon administration, the first time that we've heard that, a president's really that corrupt. There was things in the 70s tied towards, um, I don't know, like the Vietnam War. And then things in the 90s like Watergate. I'm sorry, not Watergate, tied to like some of the Clinton issues that I'll just leave vague. Those were like first barriers that came through. Now it feels like all of those dominoes have fallen. And there's no segment of society, whether it's the church, government, education, politics, because of social media, that we can't at least make the case, or it's present in our faces, that there's corruption in there. And so it's moved from being what at least seemed to be the exception and breaking news to the norm. And in some ways, we're back to social media. If you can show the corrupt educational system, the corrupt this and that, you get views, you become a hero, you virtue signal. But what people don't realize is it just undermines any trust in society as a whole. And it's not just social media. There was the sex abuse campaign that we obviously had in the Catholic Church. We've seen it in Southern Baptists. It's almost every few weeks some other leader falls. So there is some truth to this. There's no question about that. So I think that's the kind of cultural issue. I think for a lot of individuals, it's probably more personal. If they really feel that way, it's somebody they know, it's an experience they had, it's a relationship that just makes them not be trustworthy of the church. So it's one of those two or both of them in some combination. But over 12 years ago, I heard Darrell Bock say something. He said, when the narrative of the culture is Christians are bigoted, hateful, intolerant, and their next thought is, but I know a Christian and they're not that way.
Yeah.
That's what changes the narrative. So I can't control these top-down major cultural changes, but am I living a life and building relationship with people where I feel trustworthy and I don't fit that stereotype? And I'm an authentic person in who I am and my relationships and the way I live my life. That's what matters on a bottom-up level. And that's what we can control. And I think students are looking for people who are trustworthy if we'll actually model and incarnate that.
Yeah, no, I think again, when you have somebody that you know, then the stereotypes aren't there. And you see it, there's so many online, there's so many like, which I'm seeing a lot. 'Cause I know once I start paying attention, you keep seeing it over and over. But there's so many like, I worked in the mega church. I was the worship leader for 8 years, and now it was corrupt, and I'm not even a believer anymore. Like you see, and then they're building platforms from their former experience in the organized church, and now they're teaching against it. And even some surprising folks that I've seen now like totally flip around. There was one guy, and I'm sure you know who he is, and all of a sudden I saw him talking on TikTok about I thought he was defending like the deconstruction, and it turns out he's now agnostic atheist. You know, he's from Texas, and he just now he's built a huge platform really quickly because I think he was, and he's just pulling out a lot of good questions, but coming at it from the inside. And I'm seeing that a lot, which I can see then why it creates a distrust of them hearing these voices. If that's all you're hearing,
Yeah.
but what did you just say? If there's one person, like I'm hearing that from this guy or woman I don't know, but I do know Jimmy, and Jimmy's a Christian and he's not like that. Or Jeff, the youth leader, and that he's not like that, you know, or just whoever it is to have that. But we got to be intentional. That's what I keep feeling. Or, all right, one more. And then this was how do you, and it kind of almost ties into what we were just saying, apologetics, and there's a lot of apologetics and theology heads out there. And the question was, how do we move, this comes from a seminary student, how do you move apologetics beyond just the winning arguments, and so that they get to see genuine love, truth, wisdom, and Christ? Because we do a lot for the inside groups and we can train them and our language. What about the outside? In fact, I resonated with, I don't know who wrote that question, but because that's actually the chapter that I wrote in here was about
You did.
apologetics for, we have to make sure it's not just for ourselves. How are we communicating it out? And so what do you say to the person who that it moves beyond just winning arguments and just already convincing the already convinced?
So I would say two things. Apologetics never has been about winning arguments. We need to reframe how we see it. I think there's two broad purposes. Number one is strengthening believers, just giving us confidence that it is true. And second, not so much winning arguments, but removing barriers that people have who are genuinely seeking truth and open to following Christ. I don't view apologetics as winning arguments. Now, I have some debates and I want to win them, but
Yeah.
the goal is not to win an argument. You can win an argument and lose the war. So I just view apologetics as a ministry to strengthen believers, and that it's a tool hopefully God can use in his sovereignty to remove barriers of somebody who's open to and moving towards becoming a believer. That's really all that it is. So for us, how do we move from winning arguments? I think we need to actually be in a relationship with people. So when I'm this is a whole separate topic. I'm writing a book with an atheist friend of mine, and he came out and spent 3 days with me. I'm going to spend 3 days with him. When you start getting to know people who see the world differently, it becomes less like, I just want to win an argument with this guy. That's not the point. I want to learn from him. I value him whether he comes to believe or not. And I start really deeply caring about him as a human being. And I've told him, I'm like, I hope you become a believer. I'd be disingenuous if I didn't say that. But I'm just fascinated by this relationship. And so it's less and less, I got to win an argument with him. And how do I understand him? How do I care for him? How do I learn from him? How do I present truth in a way that might be compelling to him? And so that's why my dad said to me years ago, he goes, don't practice what you preach what you practice. In other words, get out there and talk to people and actually do it and build relationships. Then I think that shifts our mindset and how we even approach apologetics.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, I say this, I'm not just saying it to it. Whenever I talk about you to people, I always say Sean certainly models that tone that's so gracious and respectful. And there now, here's a question that came in. This is the wrap up. What are some books, thinkers, podcasts, or other resources that you would recommend for ministry leaders who want to better understand the cultural and philosophical questions shaping younger generations today? We will post up, it's seanmcdowell.com or .org?
.org.
.org for one, and we'll post all of these up, and they'll be in the email that we're sending out as part of this. So we'll post these up. Who else would you recommend if I'm a church leader or a parent? Who are the good ones that I could follow out there?
I really enjoy John Stone Street with the Colson Center.
Mm.
And they have these daily 5-minute like breakpoint commentaries. And they're not just about youth. Some are. They're about cultural issues. It's not political, but sometimes they'll intersect with political issues from a biblical perspective. And every Friday they do we have a weekly cultural update. We post it Friday where we take issues in the news and the culture and analyze them biblically. They do the same thing. What are trends that we're seeing and how do we think biblically and worldviewishly about it? Breakpoint is a podcast and resource I enjoy that I think will help in the way that you frame the question.
All right. And then you have two, right? You have Sean McDowell, and then you have the one that's directly with Biola. So you have two different podcasts or things that are going on.
So we have a podcast called Think Biblically,
Yep.
which is Biola and I co-host that. And we drop an episode Tuesdays, about 30 minutes, and then a Friday weekly cultural update. It's about an hour. My podcast is either on YouTube or I just also post the audio on the Sean McDowell Show. And I'll take a handful of episodes from a Think Biblically podcast, maybe once a month, and post them. But these are more in-depth conversations. And I also do 2 a week there. And that's more apologetics, cultural engagement. Like I have some episodes coming up on near-death experiences, interestingly enough.
Okay.
I'm going to visit the temple in San Diego. I'm going to do a little documentary on the temple in San Diego, the Mormon temple.
Wow.
I'll do some on evidence for the Bible. These are apologetics, cultural engagement issues. And there I bring on a lot of people who see the world differently, rather than just bringing Christians on.
All right. Well, thank you. And also, again, you didn't ask me to do this, but it's a great resource, Apologetics for Ever-Changing Culture, and there's so many topics in it. And I've shared with you in my faith journey, even becoming a Christian, it was Evidence That Demands a Verdict, which was a big part of it. Sitting in the library, I'm sorry, in a bookstore, reading it on the ground, saying, I didn't know you could be a thoughtful person and a Christian. So that was my temperament. And thank you for the legacy that you're carrying on and all that you're doing and passing down to Scott as well and all the people you influence. So Sean is going to be the main speaker at the Regeneration Forum this October 17th, Saturday, October 17th in the Bay Area. The theme is TikTok Theology, and we're going to be actually looking at various challenges that are brought up in social media, and we'll be addressing them. And Sean is the main guy, and some others that are coming in. So we will see you in October. And thank you so much, Sean, for taking some time out from recording today to hang out with us here.
Thanks, Dan. Loved it, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for watching our first ReGen session. If you're interested in learning more about Bible and theological training, you can learn more at westernseminary.edu. Our Bay Area Regeneration Forum will take place on Saturday, October 17th in San Jose. Sean McDowell will be one of our main session speakers. You can register now at regenerationproject.org. Thank you again for joining us, and we plan to release more ReGen sessions each month, so stay tuned for more.